Now we're talking with Jason Bynes, a former PR person for several car manufacturers, who is just releasing a new book titled "What Did Jesus Drive?" How are you, Jason?
I'm good, thank you.
Very interesting title, and I'm sure very interesting content in the book. I mean, PR, automotive, and all other things, especially when crisis hits. It's a big time for PR people, and the ramifications for customers are pretty big too, right?
Absolutely, and one of the guiding principles of the book is if you think you're immune to a crisis, then you violated the first guiding principle, because one is coming sooner or later, either for your company or you individually. And so knowing that a crisis could come, it could be horrific, it could be minor, get prepared in advance so you're not making it up while you're in the midst of a crisis. Because if you're prepared for a crisis, you can mitigate it, or you can ensure your survival. And of course, my guiding principles in the crisis I've been involved in was the first guiding principle is that you have to make sure the safety and satisfaction of your customer is paramount.
Yeah.
Nothing else can trump it. The second guiding principle to mitigate or survive a crisis is communicate honestly and openly, and only with facts. Never speculate. That will get you in trouble, and certainly never lie. That will kill you.
Well, especially nowadays with internet and Facebook and Twitter, where everything is so transparent. If you try to hide or make up some little thing here or there to mitigate whatever you think is going to be better for you, it's going to be the opposite result.
Well, the famous author and humorist Mark Twain said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes." That was 100 years before the internet. Now lies go around the world hundreds, thousands of times. And which brings me to the final guiding principle in surviving a crisis or mitigating it is everything you say can and will be used against you.
So,
remember the British Petroleum Deepwater Horizon oil spill. After a few days, their CEO said, "I want to get my life back."
Exactly.
And those words lived on and nailed him. He was let go as a CEO because he was so callous. People had died because of the disaster. People were put out of business during the disaster. And this fat cat CEO is complaining that he wants to get his life back to normal.
So, Jason, you were pretty successful in some of the crises that you faced. You were with Nissan, Ford, and Chrysler within the automotive industry. So can you share with us a little bit of some of the problems that you confronted and how do you solve them?
Well, the first major one was a transmission at Chrysler. It would have bankrupted the company had it been recalled instead of fixing it one by one. And there again, it was put the customer safety first, and we did that. The second biggest crisis I was in was the second sudden acceleration crisis. Of course, the first one was the Audi 5000, which almost put Audi out of business, by the way. And the second one was with the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I was in charge of the communications for that. And once again, we had to prove, first of all, what was happening. And what was happening, it was hard to say because we were blaming our customers because they were putting their foot on the wrong pedal. Usually a valet or a car wash jockey or someone not familiar with the vehicle. But what we did in the end, we found that we could keep them from making that mistake by putting brake shift interlock. And a couple of us demanded the company retrofit those vehicles, even if it was at great expense, and even though the trial attorneys would say, "Oh, the vehicle's defective." It wasn't defective. The fact is this newer technology added on to the older vehicles could keep customers from making a mistake. And that's how we survived that crisis. Of course, the biggest one I was in was the Ford Firestone tire crisis. And you can argue who was guilty, Firestone, or who was guilty, Ford. But there's one thing I know that came out of this. Only one company put the customer safety first, and that was Ford Motor Company. The second recall of Firestone tires, Ford did by themselves. Firestone didn't help at all. And I'm proud of that work at Ford, and that's the company that fired me. I got fired
Yeah, that's what customers expect nowadays from this company. And again, with all these new means of communications and like venting against the companies through social media and all those kind of things, I mean, companies are really on the spot more than ever, no?
Well, and everybody keeps saying, "Oh, we have all these tools now. We have Twitter and we have Facebook and all these avenues to communicate." Yes, that's true, but those are only vessels to use. You still have to have the character. You still have to have the guiding principle, the morals of your company that says, no matter what way I communicate, this is what I'm going to communicate.
Yeah.
And that's the key that sometimes gets lost in this high-tech world.
So, Jason, your book just is coming out, right? But you touch a little bit on the current crisis that GM is having with all the recalls and all of those kind of things. Is that true? Is that you include some of that in your book?
Yes, that's actually the epilogue of the book. It's titled "Government Motors on Fire," and I was a consultant to the head of PR at GM during the fake Chevy Volt fire crisis. And I say fake because there was nothing wrong with that vehicle. Nothing wrong. It was NHTSA out of control. But I will say what GM did. They put the safety and satisfaction of their Volt customers first. They offered to give free loaners. They offered to buy the vehicle back. Very few Volt people took them up on that offer because they were so loyal and they appreciated the way GM handled it. That's why I am absolutely amazed and flabbergasted about this ignition switch. Apparently, they didn't put the customer first.
Yeah.
And as it looks on its face, they fixed a problem that did nothing for vehicles going forward, that did nothing for hundreds of thousands, even millions of vehicles that had a defect on it, and it resulted in deaths. And I've heard GM spokespeople say, "Oh, this is mostly behind us." No, it's not.
Yeah.
I don't believe they're halfway through this crisis because the plaintiffs' attorneys are going after them, and 45 of the 50 attorney generals in this country are investigating them. They've got a long way to go, and it's going to be interesting how they get through this because if they're helping people that were hurt by the ignition switch, what about the other people that were hurt in other vehicles prior to their bankruptcy? That's the eye to the needle they have to go through to come out of this not unscathed but in a survivable way. It's not a given that GM will survive this.
Yeah, this is still going on, obviously, and again, which is also interesting to see what happened then. But right now, I mean, what has caught my attention recently is like sales, at least for now, are not affected. On the other, I mean, completely the opposites. People are like almost like the new people coming to buy new cars, almost not affected by this. What's your take on that? Why you think that happens? Why you think customers don't pay attention to some things and some others they do?
They got busy lives. I will say also that cars have become more basic transportation than they were 20 years ago. There's not as much passion about buying a car, but people still want a car, but there's not as much passion, so they don't pay attention to the issues. As I hear on conservative radio, there's a lot of low information voters out there. I go back to the crisis we were in the mid-'90s when airbags, they were afraid that kids were going to be killed because of dual airbags.
Yeah, I remember that.
And USA Today said projected 2 kids a week were going to be killed. Well, we put out, and I'm very proud of this, it was a program that went into every private and public elementary school in the country. It was called The Back is Where It's At. And we used Bill Nye, the science guy, and we made this video trying to convince kids that it was cool to sit in the back seat. We got incredible coverage. It was used in 95% of all schools. You'd think with that much noise, you wouldn't see another kid in the front seat. But I go to Tony Little, Birmingham, Michigan, and there'd be someone with a $50,000 car with a little kid in the front seat.
I know. Yeah,
So, I mean, there's so much on people's minds. There's so much information out there. You have to now cut through the clutter if you want to make a difference because there's so much noise out there.
Yeah. So we're talking to Jason Baines, author of What Did Jesus Drive? A Crisis PR in Cars, Computers, and Christianity. So is the book available now, or when it's coming up, and where can our audience look for it?
It'll available November 1st as an ebook and November 15th on newsstands and through Amazon and so forth. Just to give you some context of the title, yes, while in the last chapter I helped the world's largest Bible company avoid a crisis when they retranslated the world's most popular Bible. But it's kind of more a crisis that the industry was in, when a bunch of nutcases back in 2002, 2003 were demonizing SUVs.
Wow, yeah.
And they were burning SUV dealerships. There was a campaign called What Would Jesus
Drive? Yeah, exactly.
And so I took that on in the agency I was in, and I pointed out the hypocrisy of these people. They flew on private planes and lived in giant houses and then told you or I what we can drive.
Exactly.
But then I found, as they say, I found a man, his name was Jesus Rivera. He was a GM retiree. He was a grandfather, a Vietnam vet, and he had 2 SUVs. And so we ran a full-page ad in USA Today that said, "What does Jesus drive?" We asked him.
Excellent. Well, Jason, unfortunately, we're running out of time. It's a fascinating conversation, but again, so people can look for your book on Amazon and everywhere else. So we're gonna post it on our Facebook page so they can look for it. Okay?
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, and good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Este programa fue una producción de National Latino Broadcasting.